All right, then our last thing left to talk about here in 6.5 is if you're doing roots of any kind. And we're mostly going to stick with square roots in the problems that we do. You can do higher roots as well, but things get a little bit messier. Just for time reasons and to keep things a little bit simple, we're just going to do square roots, but the same ideas would carry through. Basically, what we're doing is using de Moivre's theorem in the other direction. So we're using inverse operations. And so instead of taking your original r and raising it to some power of n, we're starting with some r to the n, theoretically, so we're going to have to take the nth root outside. And before, we took our theta and we multiplied by the exponent we were using. When we go the other direction, instead of multiplying, we're going to divide to get back to the original theta. And then just a quick little note, if you should ever happen to finish with a negative angle after you carry out some process, we need to either add multiples of 2 pi or add multiples of 360 till you get a positive answer. The one other thing we'll have to talk about is how do we handle the fact that when you do square roots, there should be 2 answers. And if you're doing cube roots, you should have 3 answers and so on and so on. We'll talk about that when we get there. So to start with, my original problem is 16 kiss 90, which means I really have 16 times the cosine of 90 plus I sine of 90. Well, if I want to find that, the nth root of that, that's really what I'm finding, the nth root of that whole thing. And in this case, if I'm doing the square root, that n is just a 2. We don't usually write the 2 out front, we just write it as a square root, but you could. So then what I need to do is I'm just going to take the plain old square root of that number out front, whatever it might be. And then inside, I'm not going to take the square root, I'm not going to multiply, I'm going to take that old angle divided by 2 in both pieces. Okay, well the square root of 16 we can crunch out nicely in front. Inside that leaves us with the cosine of 45 degrees plus I times the sine of 45 degrees. This is my first answer. But it says for square roots there's going to be 2 answers, or if you were doing cube roots there would be 3 answers, or fourth roots there would be 4 answers. Well, if we're going to find the other answers, we need to look on other parts of the circle. And our other answers are just distributed evenly. So what we need to do, if I want to get the other answers, I need to take the answer I have right now, the 45 degrees, and add 360 over n. So in this case, that means (360) divided by 2. Which is 180. So my other answer is going to be 4 cosine 45 plus 180 plus I sine 45 plus 180, which would be 4 cosine of 225 plus I sine 225. And that's my other answer. if you were doing a cube root, you would do 360 divided by 3. You would just have to add 20, add that 120 that you would get 2 more times to get the other 2 answers. If you were doing a fourth root, let's say, there should be 4 answers. So you'd take your first answer that you get like we got, and you would do 360 divided by 4 would be 90, and you just have to add that 90 3 more times. So the process is the same, it just gets a little bit longer if you're trying to do the third root or the fourth root or the fifth root or something like that. We are, like I said, going to stick with square roots for this week, just because our plate is full enough. Let's try one more. Alright, so for this last problem, we're going to do the square roots of 25 kiss 240, which means we're really going to take 25 times the cosine of 240 plus I sine 240, and we're going to take the square root of it. So that ends up just being, out front, we do exactly what we would expect to do. That would be the 20, or the square root of 25 out front. But then I'm going to take the cosine of, in this case, 240 divided by 2. And just a reminder, the reason we're dividing by 2 is because we're doing a square root, a second root. If you were doing the cube root, you would have to divide by 3. If you were doing the fourth root, you would have to divide by 4. But here we're doing square root, so we will divide by 2. And then time for some simplifying. The square root of 25 is 5. And then I'll have the cosine of 120 degrees plus I times the sine of 120 degrees. And then that's answer 1. To get my other answer, I'm going to add 360 divided by n again, which is again 180. In fact, anytime you're going to do a square root, which is predominantly what we're going to see, you would have to add 180 to your first answer to get the second answer. So my second answer is going to be 5 times the cosine of 180 plus 120 plus I sine of 180 plus 120. And I end up with 5 cosine of 300 plus I sine of 300. And that would be answer 2. So that gives you a couple of problems for each of those. Good luck as you get ready for homework, and don't be afraid to come in and ask questions if you got them.